If you want wide sounding mixes, the way to do it is actually pretty easy, and it doesn't require a stereo widening plugin. So if there's one type of plugin that I pretty much haven't touched at all in the last, let's say, probably 10 years, it's a stereo width enhancing plugin. I used to try them a bunch and it just never really worked. It never delivered on what it promised. There would either be bad artifacts or it just wouldn't really sound wide, it would just sound different. And the reason these width enhancing plugins are not the answer is because it's a band-aid. It's a band-aid approach. It's like, don't actually worry about mixing in a way that sounds big and wide. Just mix however you want and then slap this plugin on at the end and trick your ears into thinking that it sounds wider. And we need to remember that that is an amateur attitude, okay? Amateurs focus on mixing by tricks and by hacks instead of actually going to the foundation and thinking about how do I actually mix in a way that accomplishes this goal. And slapping on band-aids like this, especially ones that do some weird phasey tricks and stuff, this is a recipe for bad translation and inconsistent mixes. So what's the answer then? What is the simple way? What is the #1 rule for getting wider sounding mixes? Well, we need to step back a bit. We need to get out of the weeds and really just think at a high level about this. So I'm just gonna put width aside for a second. Think about loudness. What makes something sound loud? Well, something sounds loud because it's comparing to something else that is quieter. What makes something sound dark? Well, it's a comparison of something that sounds bright. These terms, these descriptions of the way things sound, they're not kind of isolated words. They only make sense in comparison to other things. So with that in mind, when we come around to talk about stereo width, well, what makes something sound wide? It's comparing with something that doesn't sound wide. And what that means is that the key to width is not plugins that create the illusion of it. The key to stereo width is contrast. And so it ends up being kind of ironic, but the way to get wider mixes is actually to have less things panned out wide. And there is one other thing that I think is a key to getting wider sounding mixes, but I'll tell you that in a minute. Let's continue just talking about contrast. This is why I primarily mix just using LCR panning, left, center, right. Most of the things in my mix are either dead up the middle, just at 0 on the pan knob, or they're 100% left or they're 100% right. And this is not a new idea by any means. This is a really old concept that pros have been talking about for decades, LCR mixing. And I think the fact that we have like 200 positions on the pan knob, right? We have anywhere from 0 to 100 left, 0 to 100 right. It makes us think that we should use all those positions and pan things out like a little bit here, a little bit there. We kind of use all the space in between the center and the left and the right. And we kind of get misled by this idea that spreading things out, just filling that whole spectrum is gonna lead to a wider sounding mix. But actually what ends up happening is the exact opposite. The more things that you're putting in between, like panning something 30% out to the left, panning your guitars 75% left and right, panning other tracks kind of 50 and all over in between that spectrum, what happens is your mix actually starts sounding narrower because you're creating less and less contrast between the sides and the middle. So that means for me, rhythm guitars, my main rhythm guitars are hard panned, 100% left, 100% right. Any background vocals and vocals that are doubled, they're usually panned out 100% left and right. Acoustic guitars, hard panned, overheads, pianos, hard panned, 100%. And the only things really that I pan in the middle would be toms because I'm trying to get like a realistic picture of the kit and we don't really have the tom way over all the way to the left or right. So I'm trying to get that realistic image. So toms would be one thing I pan in between, and maybe occasionally a lead guitar or a guitar layer that I kind of want to have up the middle, but if it's fighting with the vocal, I'll just pan the guitar just a tiny bit off and it can give a little bit of separation, but that's it, and that's rare. And if you have a mix where most of the elements are mono or just panned right up the middle, and there are only a few things hard panned out wide, then your mix is gonna sound really big and wide. And that's the key. So you can ditch all of the fancy stereo widening plugins and all these tricks to try and give the illusion of width, okay? Unless you're using them to create like a really specific kind of weird ear-catching effect or something. But if you're just going for straight up big, wide-sounding, powerful mixes, this is the way to do it. Now I did mention before there's one other key when it comes to stereo width, and that's tightness. You need to have things hitting at the same time. That means really great tuning, really tight performances, especially with your guitars and bass, well, really anything, so that you get clarity, right? Because if you have sloppy takes, sloppy tuning, then things start to overlap in a nasty way. Things are kind of smearing and your mix sounds kind of clouded, and it reduces the clarity, and then you're going to reduce kind of the overall bigness and size of your mix. So that tightness is going to give you kind of space between the notes and between the beats of the rhythm. And that is another way that you're creating contrast, which along with the panning contrast is the recipe for big, wide sounding mixes. So for the most part, you want to treat your pan knob as if it only has 3 positions: center, left, and right. Try to ignore all the really space in between and all the other gimmicks and all the plugins that promise to give you extra width. It'll make your mixes sound bigger, wider, and it will actually force you to become a better mixer. All right, so I just covered the #1 rule for width here, but what about depth? Well, it turns out there's an equally simple way to create more depth in your mix without requiring any weird gimmicks or tricks or fancy tools. So if you want to find out about that, check out this video here. All right, talk to you later.